Mike Teasdale has created a digital advertising agency in the UK called Harvest Digital. Mike started a few decades ago, sometime during what I call the prehistory of digital media. To give you an idea, Google didn't exist yet. Let's go straight to our interview. Can you tell me how you started your career and when?
I did an English degree. I did a BA and an MA, and you just read a lot of books. And I thought I'd really like to read small books. So my first job properly was in publishing as they call it a line editor, but basically it's like a glorified proofreader. Publishing is a pretty awful career, I think. And I told my own son this quite recently when he was talking about it. It's just really badly paid to the point where you almost need an independent income to be able to do it. And it's not quite as glamorous as people think. The bit I liked was the writing. There's quite a lot of writing about writing captions, writing book jackets, writing publicity, I suppose, around the books. So when that job ended, I decided to go into like a copywriting job. So I got a job in a marketing department, writing kind of brochures or exhibitions. I stayed there for about 18 months. From there, I got a job in an agency to work for the Citroen account. That was the big account there. The irony was that I couldn't drive, and I was writing about cars and driving. So which is, I guess, is sort of, generally speaking, a truth about advertising is you're kind of it's not necessarily true. Yeah, so I worked there for probably 2 years. I got promoted quite quickly, and I started to think that I was being promoted beyond a level that I really felt comfortable with. So I took a bit of a break. I got a job with an agency it was then called WAV, and then it became WAV Rap Collins, and now it's called RAP. It was probably the biggest direct marketing agency, which is like a branch of advertising. I think it's probably the biggest in the UK then, and it probably still is.
What is direct marketing?
The definition people used then was above the line and below the line. Above the line is awareness, is TV, is big press ads. It's things that are meant to change the way that you think about things, introduce new brands to you, all that stuff. Below the line essentially is trying to get you to do something. Most internet advertising is direct marketing. It's all aimed to get you to do something, to buy a shirt, to book a holiday, to travel. It's quite unusual to have something which is kind of pure awareness. So yeah, that's the distinction. I worked there for about 4 years, and then I just wanted to move on. I wanted to try lots of different things. So I went freelance for a while, worked for lots of different agencies. I went to a company called Tequila. We did a deal where I worked for 2 days in the creative department, and 3 days I was setting up what became Tequila Digital. So it was one of the first digital agencies in the UK. I worked there for 3 years, say. And then I got a job for an American consultancy called Answer Think, who were really big, like 2,000 person consultancies. I became a marketing consultant. Genuinely did not have a clue what I was doing there. So I honestly think you do learn quite a lot by getting well out of your comfort zone. I was there really until the dot-com crash in 2001, where the American company just closed down in London altogether. And that's the point at which we set up the agency where I still work, which is called Harvest Digital.
When you talk about digital back in the 90s, that's when you started, when you were doing the first, digital work. What was falling under the word digital back then? Because there was no Facebook, there was no Instagram, there was no Snapchats and all these platforms.
There was no Google, actually. I think Google was founded around 2001, 2002, I think, but they weren't really doing anything very much for a few years. There was stuff like Yahoo. There were other search engines, like people have forgotten, like Overture. The search landscape was there, but Google very quickly became big simply because the search experience is much better than anything else. But yeah, what we were doing kind of viral games. We did some work in CD-ROM. We were building websites. it was kind of varied. It probably honestly wasn't really working very well quite often. But then we didn't really have the tools to measure it either. We were looking, in terms of data, we were looking at like log file analysis. People weren't really using cookies to track people persistently between websites and all that stuff.
How has the advertising world changed over the last 30 years? What would you say were the key aspects of advertising back then, and then what it is today? Like what can you not miss today in order to do good advertising?
Obviously, the rise of the internet has been massive. It's been very, very disruptive for advertising. In terms of device, we've gone from being very desktop focused to being very mobile focused. The techniques have changed. There's a trend towards very, very short video content, maybe 10 or 12 seconds. And if people looked at all the ads they consume over a day, I'd guess that they would be probably quite a large chunk of the ads that you see will be that kind of length. So advertising often isn't really telling a story the way it used to. It's become more direct. It's more like an animated billboard, I suppose. You're trying to kind of create an impression, tell people about an idea, and then tell them what to do very quickly.
You have your own agency, and of course there are certain profiles that you're looking for to be part of your team. What are the jobs descriptions and profiles that you're looking for in your team?
I think the work we do is quite analytical. So we've often hired people from. I mean, we also do quite a lot of like international work. So we quite like good language skills. Beyond that, we want people with decent maths and often kind of science degrees. That's kind of where we've often recruited. I'm sort of becoming a bit more like relaxed about that, because the fact is we're not really doing anything to do with physics. The concepts are not that hard. I think the key quality is curiosity. If a set of results for a client is good, I need somebody who will say why they're good. What's driving the success? Can we do more of that? I hate just hearing people say that the results are bad on client X. They're never all bad. They'll be bad in a certain area. And you need to go beyond that and say, okay, Facebook is bad because we've got a competitor who's targeting the same audience that we are, but their offers are more compelling than our offers. And when you get to that, you think, okay, so can we improve our offers? Is this just become a bad channel for us? You can solve it. Just saying that something's bad, it's just it's hopeless. So yeah, I need people to just drill down a bit more into the data and really just sort of have the intellectual curiosity to say, well, okay, why is this good? Why is this bad? Why is this bit working? I think one thing I'd say about digital is there's so many data points that are available to us that when you start thinking it from a data point of view, there's lots of different ways to slice that up.
That's very inspiring. I mean, definitely advertising has gone through so much change over the years. I did study advertising myself, and I mean, what I knew back then and what is today, the situation and also the requirements in order to fulfill a job like this is completely different. And that brings me to my next question. If I were somebody who started advertising 30 years ago or 20 years ago and wanted to reinvent himself or herself and start and do a digital marketing, digital advertising work, are there transferable skills, or is there something else that this person should do? How do they apply, or can they apply to today's digital advertising jobs?
I know a lot of people who've been in advertising as long as I have, and lots of them don't really work in digital, or they've drifted into it. The skills are entirely transferable. That we're creating a lot of video content. There's a whole set of skills around that. We're still doing a lot of writing. Good writing has always been quite precise, quite concise as well. And the ability to persuade and to work out why people do certain things. And from a copywriting point of view, perhaps the absolute quality that you look for is empathy. Is to get under the skin of an audience and work out why they'd be motivated to do things, or what they're worried about, or how you can introduce a thought that they may not have had before. I'd say, like, from an abstract point of view, there's absolutely no reason why people can't. The reason they don't is two things. First of all, there's quite a lot of ageism, I think, in digital. I'm 60, so I'm like literally the eldest person in digital. So, but I just know that we just tend to hire people who are in their 20s, and the people doing the hiring are probably also in their 20s or early 30s. And and it's not really a conscious thing. And we absolutely, no digital agency will have, you won't find a policy document anywhere that says we must hire people who are really young. That's just the way it is. And there's a feeling that for a channel like TikTok or Instagram, that young people maybe have more of an understanding of it. I just don't really think that's true. The other thing, though, that digital is like amazing at, in a bad way, is just creating jargon and acronyms, and not what we would say, like the idiom is calling a spade, just saying this is what we mean about things. So we won't talk about making a sale or whatever the goal of the communication was. We would generally talk about it in terms of CPA, and CPA as an acronym. People can't quite even agree what that means. They know it either means cost per acquisition, in other words, cost per new customer, or cost per sale, or cost per action is probably more accurate. And there's much worse than that. Sort of RLSA, ROAS. It's just an alphabet soup of things. So and genuinely, people in the agency do talk like that the whole time. And when we've hired grads and we've brought new people into the agency, they've told us that they just don't really understand what people say for the first 2 or 3 weeks till they've kind of got on top of what all this stuff means.
And I have the impression that it's ever evolving. Like every month there's maybe a new acronym or a new word. And if you don't keep up, like for instance, I haven't used Instagram in a long time, and now I am using it because of the podcast. But I talked to my niece who is 20 years younger, and she says, Auntie, Facebook is now old. Now everybody's on Instagram. And then the next generation says, no, it's rather TikTok. So do you use all of these media, or do you specifically target, let's say, Instagram or Facebook, or what? How do you choose your own mix?
We shouldn't really be thinking about channels. We should be thinking about audiences. If we want to talk to your niece, for instance, we should absolutely be using TikTok or Instagram. And the tools that we use, because we've got a sense of how old people are, what kind of things people are looking for, what their interests are, that would sort some of that out. The channels like TikTok, it feels slightly naive as a platform. I don't think you can buy directly off TikTok, and certainly there have been channels where you can't click off onto something else. So there's some things which make a channel really good. Some questions are really simple. So Facebook and Instagram are both essentially the same company, and they run essentially the same ads. So it's very easy to set a campaign up that runs on both, and you can just tell Facebook that you want to make sales, or you want more people to see your ad, or whatever your goal is, and their algorithms will optimize between the different channels, which obviously is tragic. If you're a media buyer and you thought your whole life is working out decisions like that, that's quite depressing. If you're thinking, oh, we've replaced you with some maths.
How easy is it to get an internship, or to start working in an agency like yours for 20-year-olds who are finishing their studies and would love to work in the advertising, digital advertising field?
Honestly, it probably hasn't been too hard in the past, but because we'd always we're quite small. We've probably got about 24 people, but we'd always take a couple of grads on every year. With the pandemic, that's changed. But partly it changed because we started to panic and thinking, oh my God, the world's going to collapse, blah, blah, blah. Then we stopped thinking that and thought, no, we really still need some grads. But by then we didn't have an office anymore, and we were just all working remotely. And actually the bit that we're worried about is how well we can teach and how well people will learn when we're not physically in the same place. We had a couple of kind of data points for people that didn't really work out, who I think they would have worked out better if we'd been like in an office together. If you could see somebody's screen, you walk past them and you go past like an hour later and they're still doing the same thing, it shouldn't have taken that long. Then you realise somebody needs some help. But those insights have gone when everyone's working remotely. And of course, people can feel quite isolated. At this second, we're recruiting. There are six vacancies on our website, so we're sort of trying to put that right. We still don't have an office, but we should go back into an office next month. I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, apart from the horrors of the last few years, it's very interesting to see how it will settle down from the point of view of like the future of work, just what we will do when we're all in the same space. Because if somebody's just going to sit and look at an Excel spreadsheet and that's what they need to do for a day, I don't think they need to spend an hour coming into London, another hour going out. They need to be in the office to be doing something collaboratively with other people.
Do you have a couple of hints or tips that you can give to a grad, like a recent grad who would like to start a career in advertising? What would you recommend that he or she does as first steps?
What we don't often see from CVs is people being quite precise about what they want to do. So, I just want to work in digital marketing. It's not much use to us because you're asking us to do the work for you and just look at your CV and think, well, you might be good at this, you might be good at that. What are your interests? Where's your focus? So I think it's really helpful if people think a bit harder about it and think, okay, well, I really like maths, I really like analysis, I really like data. So, and there are jobs around what we'd call the biddable team of managing paid search, managing Facebook, which are very, very analytical, really. And then there are other jobs which are essentially creating content and writing content and much closer to the jobs I had when I first started. So, if people did a little bit of research and said, right, I'm really interested in becoming a content executive, for instance, or a biddable exec, that's really helpful. The other thing is it's quite easy to get some experience online. And again, right, I'd much rather have somebody's CV where they say, okay, my friend has an e-commerce business and I've been helping them and I've been writing content about products and so I've got a sense of it, or I've been looking at the back end data, and this is the kind of things that I've noticed by looking at their analytics. And then there's a ton of online resource as well. It's not hard to find like training materials or things like that to get a bit deeper into the subject.
I was just thinking, when we talk about digital, of course, I'm thinking about being in front of a computer the whole time. Now, is there satellite positions, let's say, around the world of digital marketing and digital advertising that does not necessarily require sitting at a desk in front of a computer?
I mean, like, we probably don't think of it necessarily as a sort of job in digital, but it is. Like, influencers are sitting, creating video content and probably not really thinking very, very much around that. The really fascinating thing about digital over the last few years is that virtually every agency transitioned to not being in the office really quickly. Yesterday I was working on a pitch. We were waiting for some data from somebody in Poland. Then somebody in London was going to do something with that data and we're going to send it back to somebody else, actually also in either in Belgium or Poland, I'm not sure. And I wasn't in London, wasn't at my desk, and I was just trying to coordinate that. So yeah, it's changing from that respect. I mean, that said, working in media sounds very glamorous. And when we had an office, if I looked at the media team, a lot of it is actually just sitting, staring at Excel all day long. My daughter works for an agency in Sydney, and her job, it's called digital analyst. We would call it something different, but I think it's kind of, they probably called it analyst to make it feel a bit more important so they can charge more.
What do you call it?
We just call it boring. We just call it like, biddable executive or something like that. So we haven't put a ton of thought into it.
Definitely a fascinating, ever-changing and evolving line of work. Very nice to meet you, Mike, and thank you for your testimonial.